Hey, it's Mike here, and today are vegan bodybuilders going against their own ethics by eating a little bit of extra calories in order to get that muscle? Well, that's an idea that was put forth a couple weeks ago by Alex O'Connor, formerly Cosmic Skeptic, who is an ex-vegan that I have responded to in detail before. Many of you messaged me to respond to this, and at first I was like, I don't really find this idea compelling. I don't need to respond to it. But then I was like, but I need to explain why it isn't compelling, and it's always fun to just get into those crazy edges of veganism, like, should you even breathe in right now because you might swallow a bug? Answer is coming up. But let's get right into it. It sort of starts out with him reflecting on quitting his vegan diet, what's changed. He says this.
The main reason that I stopped being a vegan was a practical one. I found that I practically couldn't keep it up. It was a practical consideration.
And to be a total butt here, I can't help but think he's smart enough to be an Oxford student, but not smart enough to learn how to cook or batch cook. Like, was Oxford his second choice behind culinary school? I'm just joking around, but he talks about his new approach of looking at this issue.
My approach has shifted from a sort of individual boycott approach to a top-down legislation and industry reform type approach. So there's that, but factory farming is still a moral abomination.
I personally think we need both, especially from the perspective of somebody that's been vegan for 14 years now and living in the US. It's like, okay, you can directly spend your money buying dead animals and products or whatever. That money goes directly to these corporations, which they can just take a fraction of, turn that around, lobby, and then have way more influence than you just going to politicians and being like, hey, please, how about you change the laws on factory farming, which in many cases has been smaller vegan-run organizations that are like little lobbying groups that somehow get some little things changed here and there, but clearly not enough. And then he talks about this reformed system, I guess getting rid of factory farms, giving animals enough room, but then again requires personal action of eating way less meat because of the increased land requirement, etc. Now, and even in that reformed system, you're again killing animals deliberately to eat, but he responds to that idea here.
Because a lot of vegans will say, okay, sure, you can sort of raise a cow in relatively humane conditions, that is humane relative to a factory farm, but you're still killing them, right? And as long as you're causing any amount of unnecessary suffering and certainly death to an animal, that's something that's wrong.
And this is really the crux of it, the idea that any unnecessary killing is wrong, that being a sort of vegan ideal that vegans might not necessarily be living up to. He does elaborate, but I just want to say it feels like we're getting into that territory of like walking outside could be considered wrong because you might step on a bug. And that's why this principle of unnecessary killing always being wrong and that being like the main compass here is not necessarily what I choose. I choose to follow that standard definition of veganism where you're choosing to minimize harm to animals as much as is practicable and possible. And really, we have to make sure that people can still be vegan and maintain sanity by not getting so caught up in the details of not harming animals in any situation to the point that they're just in the room, totally agoraphobically clutching onto their pillow, wondering how many dust mites they're currently killing.
The concept of crop deaths comes up a lot in this vegan discussion, and it's kind of memed upon by the vegan community because, of course, it's ridiculous to suggest, as many people do, that you shouldn't be a vegan because don't you know that animals are killed in crop production? It's a silly thing to say because we kill far more animals in the production of crops that we then feed to livestock than we do in the production of crops that are eaten directly.
Yes, this is the point that I obviously make all of the time, and I'll just say, give him even more credit. I'm happy that he didn't just conveniently forget this, as many ex-vegans do within like the first week, 3 to 4 days.
The concept of a vegan bodybuilder. A bodybuilder, at least when they're bulking, when they're trying to grow, is somebody who will intentionally eat an extra maybe 200-300 calories every single day, maybe even more. And they're doing so for reasons that, strictly speaking, are completely unnecessary to their health. But you don't need to grow to remain healthy. You can eat your maintenance calories for the rest of your life and be perfectly fine and thrive. Here's the thing. So long as animals animals are killed in crop production, then as long as you're eating food that is unnecessary to your health, you are causing unnecessary suffering and death to animals.
But as a commenter mentioned, this person, Alex, who's turned them vegan in the first place with their strong vegan arguments, has in this case completely failed to make a compelling argument for them to change their habits, and it doesn't seem to be very compelling to anybody here. And I want to be fair to him here, because next he says, no, this is not a justification to kill animals.
It doesn't follow from this that therefore eating animals is fine.
And this is where I might be projecting on him a little bit, because it seems that the whole reason that he's making this argument is not because he actually cares about how vegans are causing harvest deaths or whatever. It's that he's saying, hey, you're not perfect, so it is justified for me to eat my non-factory farmed meat. Even though he's saying it's not a justification to eat meat, I mean, why else would he even bring this up? So it's almost like a really convoluted eye for an eye fallacy, where it's like, hey, you are flawed, therefore it's okay for me to do my thing that causes harm. And this is because earlier on he brought it up in the context of eating non-factory farmed meat, saying, oh, there's gonna be some unnecessary harm there, but because they're living a better life, etc., it's not really that different than the unnecessary harm that vegans are causing by a few extra 100 calories. But I think it goes without saying that directly paying to kill like a highly sentient animal that we know is going to die versus an abstract number of harvest deaths that's somewhere down the line that you're not intentionally doing, those are a little bit different, and we'll cover that more in a second. And I do apologize if I'm projecting onto Alex here. I just don't see another reason for him to make this argument other than a justification for his own habits. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, this brings me to more of a greater societal idea of, it's my view, and he mentions it, that vegan bodybuilders are helping to encourage people to kill less animals because so many people, especially men, are eating more meat to get more protein so that they can have muscles, yet vegan bodybuilders prove that you don't need to do that. He addresses that.
Eating the vegan food that a vegan bodybuilder will eat is nowhere near on the level of eating factory farmed meat, for example. And I would imagine most vegans feel the same way, that vegan bodybuilding isn't unethical. In fact, a lot of vegans point to vegan bodybuilders as examples of what veganism can do.
And yeah, I would go further to say that each vegan bodybuilder, through the people that they interact with in real life and perhaps on social media, could have, an unknown but probably tangible influence in lowering the animal product consumption of people around them. Even if they're able to get one person to eat slightly less meat, that's probably going to be less direct animal harm than that extra, a couple hundred calories, abstracted harvest deaths somewhere down the line.
But what they're pointing to there is an example of someone who's unnecessarily eating food that they don't need to eat to be healthy, that results in the unnecessary suffering and death of animals.
No, but he's implying that we should just delete all vegan bodybuilders, stop all vegan bodybuilding because it is harming excess animals, causing excess harm. But it's also the case here that telling people to stop vegan bodybuilding could also lead way less people to turn vegan in the future and end up harming way more animals. Think of the amount of animals that Alex just killed by telling people to not vegan bodybuild. And this is where all of this kind of becomes a little bit of a joke, because it really is so abstract and so unmeasured. I would love to see more research across more farms, more farming types, etc., on actual harvest deaths and get a better picture of it. But, we're just shooting in the dark here. I recently made a little attempt to do this with my response to Carnivore Dr. Ken Berry and Lierre Keith saying that, one baby deer dies at the end of every wheat harvest, and that, going and doing a little bit of math, and the math appears to be that if somebody relied on 100% of their lifetime calories from wheat, they would contribute just to about 1/30 of a deer death. And then, of course, the comments under that were like, hey, I grew up on a wheat farm, and we don't end up with deer in our combines, and also baby deer don't exist in the fall, they are born in the spring. The whole thing is just, anyway. And one thing that I never hear on the harvest death argument, and this has to do with looking at more of a societal shift versus just individual choices, what's right and wrong right now, and that is that if we shifted to a more vegan society, you can bet that the harvest deaths would go way down, because you'd have farmers that are vegan directly trying to lower these deaths as much as possible. But I do want to tack on another implication of his calorie thing. He's saying that, we should all, if we're vegan, eat as little as we can to stay alive. In fact, he would be saying that people who are overweight or obese that are on a vegan diet because they're consuming excess calories that is also against their own ethics. And that's a whole nother can of worms, and this is just all another example of how vegans are held to such a ridiculously higher standard than people that eat meat in terms of their own ethics. And then, stuff gets crazy with like plant sentience and all that stuff. But I do think it is good to talk about topics like this. It's interesting to talk about the edges of veganism. I think it is valid to say, yes, as you eat more calories, there is more of a harvest death impact. But if you are somebody that really does care about that small increment, then you could also bodybuild, but then focus more on perhaps nuts or other fruits and things like that that are less harvest death heavy than something where you're plowing a field. But again, the fact that vegans are put in a situation where they're expected to think about something like that when your average person is literally directly paying these corporations to kill these guaranteed highly sentient animals over and over again, every day, just eating it all the time. So I still think the issue with Alex here is that his reasons for quitting still don't match his own ethics. It was impractical, but how impractical was it really? How much effort has he really put into trying it again? I mean, he's probably put more effort into making videos like these about how, vegans aren't doing everything that they should possibly do than, talking to a vegan nutritionist, or as one of the comments said, sitting down with Earthling Ed and like working some things out. And again, maybe I'm wrong to think of this as a justification to say vegans are doing some wrong, so it's okay for me to also harm some animals. If it's more humane or whatever, then vegans should be able to live with me doing that. It almost seems like a proposition for vegans to accept his habits for eating animals. But again, I'm just reading into things, and you can of course let me know down below if you think I'm right or wrong, or if there's any points I missed. I feel like there's a lot to think about here, and I'm sure there's a lot that you guys are thinking about that I'm not thinking about, so you can think about it in the comments down below. And of course, feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.